Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Dolores Tarver. I'm a licensed psychologist, and it is time for the tea. Tea Time with Dr. Tarver is a wellness-based podcast. It is not intended to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health provider. Welcome back to our August episodes, everyone. We've been so excited about this series. We have discussed healthy dating relationships. We talked about some of the factors that led to incarceration and how people can make changes in their life to avoid that path, or if they've been on that path, to be able to get to a place where they're living their fullest potential. We have also discussed some of the rights that women lost in the overturning of Roe versus Wade and how that has affected women's rights with regard to their bodies. And today, one of my favorite conversations that I've been looking forward to is to talk about COVID and how it's affected our kids. So you know that you can drop your comments in the chat. Go ahead, and if you have questions or comments, make sure that you do that. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started because we have much to get to. So it is my sincere pleasure to introduce to some and just reconnect with others, Dr. Charity Starr Mitchell. She
Hello.
Hi. Got this good old bio, Marie, for
Okay.
me.
Okay.
She characterizes herself as a practitioner of souls and a servant of the people. She received her Bachelor of Social Work degree from Talladega College in Talladega, Alabama, a Master of Social Work from the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa, and a Doctor of Ministry degree with honors at Southern Methodist University's Perkins School of Theology in Dallas, Texas, where she focused her studies in urban ministries and community development. Dr. Mitchell is the founder and CEO of Love Star Care Connection Services, LLC, a social services and individual counseling agency that provides support services to individuals, families, and communities in the state of Georgia. Dr. Mitchell serves as the Director of Community Engagement at Morehouse School of Medicine, where she seeks to address health equity in communities of color. And she serves as a licensed local minister and is on the elders ordination track for the North Georgia United Methodist Church. Welcome to the show, Dr. Starr Mitchell.
Thank you. So glad to be here. I'm so excited.
Me too, me too, me too. Everybody come on in, invite a friend. This conversation is a much needed conversation, and I'm very excited about it. So the National Institute of Health, and these are some stats from April of 2020 to about June 30th of 2021, suggests that more than 140,000 children, so 1 in 500 kids under the age of 18 in the United States, lost a parent, custodial grandparent, or grandparent caregiver who provided their basic needs, including love, security, and daily care. So talk to us about what are some of the ways our young babies have been affected by losing their caregivers during COVID.
I don't think it's easy to lose a parent at all, but COVID opened up a Pandora's box that, wow, it is just a lot of pain and a lot of uneasiness. There was a lot of emotions that young people are not even really capable of verbalizing. But most of all, the lack of grieving in a community, especially with an African American community. We're so used to the tradition of community support through funerals, repasses, having somebody drop off a whole bunch of chicken and collard greens and Publix potato salad.
Yes,
But
ma'am.
in COVID, not only was the loss hard, but the traditions and our rituals of celebrating in the midst of loss, that was missed as well. So that was one big, huge factor, losing a parent and not being able to be comforted in the traditional ways that we're comforted. One of the challenges that I noticed in many of our young people, a lot of these young people lost not one, but both parents. That's an extreme loss. And the gap of time that they lost their parents may have been within a couple of months, a couple of weeks, some folks even a couple of days. So that surfaced a lot of emotions, a lot of just a lot of grief, anger, not being able to understand nor comprehend. It just changed the whole family dynamics. Those are two of the main challenges that I've experienced helping to walk students and young people through the grief journey in COVID. Another major challenge is the that I noticed was on top of the loss of the parents or a parent, young people, especially children of color, had to deal with the disparities that were going on prior to COVID hitting. So if you were already challenged with being in a non-nuclear family where you were being raised by a single parent household and there was friction with the other parent, those issues, and if they were never resolved, they will continue to persist. And so navigating that family structure is also a challenge for a lot of young people because they need the support. They lost one parent, but then the other parent, the relationship may or may not be as healthy as they would like. So they're not receiving the support that they need to, because you may have a parent that is emotionally immature or emotionally not capable of providing the care that child or that young person needs at that time. So those are the major challenges that I've noticed, but there are a slew of other challenges, but those were the major challenges that I noticed working with young people.
We think about how difficult it is for adults to grieve and go through this grief cycle. And you talk about losing multiple people. And we know that during COVID, people lost generations. So, it might have been a grandfather, a father, an uncle, a brother, it might have been a mama. And so you literally are talking about, I don't even have a chance as an adult to catch my breath and really grieve, not even thinking about these babies and them trying to grieve, not even fully understanding the grief cycle in the way that adults do. But you brought up a good point, Dr. Starr Mitchell, when you said, and what if the people that are left behind are not in a healthy place to even be able to raise you?
Mm-hmm.
And I just think about some family dynamics where there was hostility between co-parents or even extended family members. And so you might still be talking negative about this person who I just lost.
Yes.
And I've got to come over here and now live in your space.
Mm-hmm. That's a whole vibe. It's a whole vibe. Yes. And that is what I've experienced coaching young adults, young people, helping them to journey through listening to them. A lot of these challenges, Dr. Tarver, I didn't even have answers for. But what I found healthy was being at a place where I could sit and listen, have empathy, and allow them to take me through their journey, walk me through the hurt and the pain, and I'm there in the midst of the mud with them. And I think that's what young people are looking for. None of us have the answers for generational loss. I think this is the first time we've experienced this in maybe a century. The last serious pandemic, was almost a year ago. So none of us really have the answer. I kind of got pushed into this. And I call it a divine pushing because of the need. And because of my own journey, being in school at a young age and having to deal with the fear of grieving and the fear of death, because my mother was ill. And I was always waiting on that phone call of, I'm sorry, you lost your parent. Now she's still here. She's still holding on, and you better.
Mama yet holding on.
She's holding on. But I can identify with that. And I think we have to take time with these young people, not to prescribe to them or not to overshine their journey and their story by giving our story, but using our stories and our experiences to help us to have empathy and to be patient with them and to walk that journey, because they're still at a development age where they are, especially that teenage age between 13 and 17, 18, they're still trying to balance their emotions. So along with the high their hormones going up and down, they're now dealing with sadness and grief and anger and fear and all this other stuff. So it's going to take us being very patient, I allow my patients to use words that we wouldn't normally use. I think it's therapeutic sometimes to say what
Mhm.
you feel and how you feel it,
Absolutely,
just as
absolutely.
long as you're not harming me or
Mhm,
anyone else. But
mhm,
sometimes they need to talk to God in ways that they feel comfortable. And sometimes talking to God or whatever deity they worship, or if they don't worship a deity, they're talking to their parents, because there's still anger there that may be unresolved, but had given them the opportunity to walk through that journey and walk with them in the mud, get in there with them,
mhm.
and not prescribing or trying to fix it, but to allow them to work it out and give them the tools to work it out.
And this is an important aspect of sometimes we don't allow people to sit in their emotions.
Mhm.
We don't allow people to sit in their feelings, and kids in particular who are trying to learn how to navigate them. And we wonder why we grow up and we don't have emotional regulation as adults because we weren't allowed to be able to express our emotion as kids.
Mhm.
Grieving isn't pretty.
Mm-mm.
And so, yeah, I can absolutely be angry, and have some conversations with God
Yes.
about how I feel about you taking,
Mm.
and you can say raw things with your
Mhm.
mental health provider that you can't say to your family members.
Well, your
Like,
pastor.
and your pastor, like, look, if you was gonna take one,
Why you ain't take the other?
why you ain't take the other one? They ornery, they don't show up for me, like it's combative. Like,
That's real
you know,
talk.
that's real
That's
talk.
real
And
talk.
it's so important for young people to be able to have a safe space to say that, because they have to be so controlled so much of the time.
Mhm.
And we're quick to tell young people, don't feel that, you shouldn't feel that way, or that ain't nothing you need to be worried about. Just, and it dismisses their experience, and they
Mhm.
need somebody. You can't fix it for me because you can't bring this person back.
Right.
But it's just so nice to have somebody that I know is walking, at least if not beside me, somewhere near me. So if I needed them, I could know
Yeah.
I wasn't by myself.
And I think this conversation is so important because I feel like our young people need a community of support, not just their immediate family, but also wherever they go. If they go to the beauty salon,
Mm,
they need to talk, or I feel like the cosmetologists and the
mhm,
stylists need to have some type of emotional or mental health awareness enough
mhm,
to be
mhm,
able to navigate a conversation and refer them somewhere, because young people, you never know what triggers it. Something will trigger it and you never know. It could be the smell of biscuits. It can be
mm,
a show that you used to watch, a
mm,
song,
mm,
Lion King, something
mm,
can trigger it. And we have to be in a place. It's very important for us to be in a place to stop what we're doing, recognize it, and walk that journey with them. And just to be able to just be there and not, like you said, dismiss it.
mhm,
Um, I think it's extremely important for our clergy to have mental health awareness training.
mhm.
I'm clergy, and I feel like this: if you're a pastor and you don't have at least a therapist or a counselor on speed dial, then I'm not trusting you with my soul, because you I don't feel like that you're emotionally healthy enough, because you have a lot
Mhm,
of weight on you. How are you getting
mhm.
rid of that weight? And I think
Absolutely.
we have to get to a point where we demystify what it means to how we understand mental health,
Mhm,
especially in the wake of COVID.
mhm, mhm,
A lot of our worlds were shaken up, and I think it is very important for us, especially as it pertains to working with young adults,
mhm,
adolescents, to be the rock that they need for us to be. But also, we need to manage our traditional ways of handling stuff.
mhm.
Mental health has not always been the forefront of our conversations in the African American community. We all experience somebody in our family living in the back room, and we take plates during family reunion to them, to Uncle Junior or Auntie Bebe,
Mhm.
and we just kind of shut them off. But mental health is so broad now. When you consider the volume or the gravity of death that has
Mhm.
taken place in my family alone, we lost 9 people, and this is a
Oh,
span of
wow.
2 years. Some COVID related,
Mhm,
some non-COVID related,
mhm,
but just not being able to grieve with the
mhm,
family
mhm,
and not being able to go to those traditional settings where you are supported
mhm.
is enough for an adult. Just imagine how the young people are are taking that. But it's just important for us to create opportunities for them to celebrate the
Mhm.
life, to remember, to be
Mhm.
angry, to
Yes.
be sad, and then also let them know that they can be champions
Mm.
for other young people who may be experiencing grief and loss as well, because how they are handling and the way that they handle the loss,
Mhm.
they're coping with the loss, can be an inspiration to somebody else.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good segue too into these other dynamics that our young people are dealing with. And you alluded to this earlier and made a statement about it before. I'm not able to grieve in the ways that I traditionally grieve. I may have people around me that are not emotionally mature, not in a place to be able to fully caregive for me in the way this person who I lost was caregiving for me. I got bullying. We're
Mhm.
still in schools dealing with COVID, and we relaxed the mask standard, then we put it back in place, and then and I don't know how triggering that might be for a kid,
Yeah.
knowing that you lost all these loved ones to COVID, and you go to school and find out that your governor is like, no, you're not going to wear no mask
Mhm.
in here. And so how does that feel to a kid? And then you're dealing with all of the cyber issues where people are making statements and all of these things out here in social media. And, people were saying this thing was fake. People were saying, talking to folks about dismissing what their experience might have been. And so I can only imagine how dealing with violence, all of, you look around, shootings everywhere, mass killings of people, is your school safe? How do all of those things even factor into this grieving process and this weight that you mentioned our young people are carrying around with them?
I believe they're feeling it all.
Mm.
When we are speaking of adolescents and young people, that's what Generation Z is that.
Yeah, look,
So
because I'd be like, now, what are we?
what are we? And
Yeah,
I'm like
yeah.
millennial slash Generation X.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm right at the end of one and right in the beginning of
Of
the
the
other.
other. Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so Generation Z though, they are more they're well versed in technology. They are they're not as xenophobic as the rest of
Mm-hmm.
the other generations. So they have a lot of pluses in regards to how they engage conversations about
Mm-hmm.
race disparities and cultural and economic disparities. So I think they're feeling it all. They're feeling it all. However, I do believe that because of their ability to embrace what it means to be emotionally well,
Mm-hmm.
and their conversation around mental health is not as taboo as it was in my generation, or our parents' generation. I
Mm-hmm.
do think that there is a bit of hope for them moving through this path. It's a lot. It's a whole lot because they're feeling it all. They're feeling the racial injustice. They're feeling the Mike Browns of society and the George Floyds. I was in the hospital giving birth when George Floyd was murdered,
Mm.
and they shut down Atlanta. I was in Midtown Emory, and they shut down the street. We couldn't even leave. I had to stay there an extra day, so I knew my child was going to be an insurrectionist because she was born in the
Look
middle
what she was born into.
of people, right? In the pandemic. But our young people, they felt that too, as
Mm-hmm.
their parents or their loved ones were in the hospital or they've already passed and they
Mm-hmm.
weren't able to attend the funeral. They still felt it because they can identify with how they are treated as people of color,
Mm-hmm.
Black men and Black young women who are often stereotyped and targeted.
Mm-hmm.
So there is anger there. So what we have to do as clinicians, as ministers, as teachers, or whatever your profession is to provide provide a space for them to have healthy conversations so they can pick away at it a little at a time. They have to eat, they're going to eat away at the mountain, but you don't have to eat the mountain all at one time.
Yeah.
If we had opportunities in church, how
Mm-hmm.
often do we go to church, even if it's Zoom? If we had opportunities to have conversations in our boys and girls clubs, if we had opportunities, like I said, in the beauty salons, wherever we
Mm-hmm.
go, wherever our safe spaces are, provide opportunities to have healthy discussions
Mhm.
around it and let these young people talk and let them drive the conversation, because
Mhm.
we will learn a whole lot about where they are, how they're able to handle it, how they're able to cope. If they are using other methods of self-medication to deal.
Mhm.
In these conversations, you learn a lot about these young people, but I do think that they are feeling the social upheaval.
Mhm.
I know they felt in my conversations with the young folks, even when I was working at Georgia Gwinnett, January the 6th, 2021, when the folks took over
The
the
capital.
Capitol,
Mhm.
and we had our domestic terrorist attack on the Capitol.
Mhm.
Young people felt that they were the main ones out there on social media appalled at this. They could not believe that grown folks were out here doing this in the middle of a pandemic, all this.
Mhm. Mhm.
So where are our platforms to help
Mhm.
them to healthily or effectively navigate these conversations? How are we creating spaces and programs and initiatives that will help them to pluck away at it a little at a time? But yeah, it's a lot. It's a whole lot. I
It
think we need an
definitely is.
additional 5 hours to deal with all
Listen,
the stuff these young folks.
listen. But I mean, I think it's good to even begin to have this conversation because you have said this a couple of times now, like, hear them. It is just so important for them to be heard, for them to have safe spaces where they can talk, for them to be able to know where to go. And that help doesn't have to look the same. Yes, over here, and there, there are some cities who have embraced this more than others, where the hair care providers also have a mental health space.
Yes.
Our churches also have a mental health space.
Mhm.
When you are at the family reunion and you say something, instead of you being dismissed or shoved off to a room,
Mhm.
someone says, hey, I got your mama some information.
Yes.
Check out this Instagram page
Mhm.
for therapy for insert here,
Mhm.
that you can go to and look at some things, and we're going to make sure you get connected, right?
Mhm.
Because as you said, gone are the days where we can ignore
Yeah.
mental health. But
Mhm.
not only do we not need to ignore it, we need to be able to make sure that our kids can access it.
Right.
Yeah. So talk to we mentioned this grieving piece, and I know that some people don't understand what grief would look like in a young person.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
Ooh.
um, right? Because we say that young people are not adults. So what does grieving look like in a young person, and does it change over time? What should people be on the lookout for?
That is an excellent question. And I think, and the broader question is, what does mental health challenges look like in a young
Come
person?
on.
I think that's a broad, but I'm gonna go back to your question, but I think that's a good question. What does that look like? Because in our
Mm,
minds, it's a certain way. We have our own idiosyncrasies that we say over time, but that person just a little touchy. He ain't all together there.
yes.
Grief is not always crying. It's not always locking yourself in a room. And it is that at times.
Mm,
But for young people, what I've learned, a lot of times grief is agitation.
mm,
I'm agitated. I'm mad. I'm upset. Anything that you say to this person, they're snapping off, self-medicating through
mm,
sex,
mhm, mhm,
through medications around the house, over the counter drugs,
mm,
and even some of these if you have an older family member or a family member that may have had a surgery and they have codeine or something that got, the stronger drugs laying around the house, and you're using it for pain, but these young folks may be chopping it up and using it to self-medicate because they want to deaden the pain. That's still grief.
mm,
That's grief. Um, uh, Talking too much is grief.
mm,
If their behavior is normally mild and subtle, that talkativeness is a sign of, I don't want to go to sleep, I don't want to be alone. That's a sign of grief. It's just so many different signs. You just being able to be cognizant and notice when there's a red flag. If something is not normal,
mm.
or something is not comfortable, not comfortable, if something is not a
Typical.
thank you,
Mm,
typical behavior of that young person, then I would look into it and just kind of, pay attention to it. And you don't have to prescribe anything to them, but just give them your attention and ask questions.
Mm.
A lot of times what young people want you to do, they want you to be present. Now, the adolescent age is a very fickle age because sometimes they want to be around you and sometimes they don't. But I've learned that you have to deal with them like you deal with a wave. You can't force the wave. I don't do the, what do you call it when you do the board on the waves in the ocean?
Surfing?
Surfing. Thank you. Surfing. I don't surf, but I
Mm-hmm,
watch
mm-hmm.
surfers. I just recently visited the beach, and they wait patiently until the right wave comes. They set themselves up and they prepare themselves to ride the wave, but
Yeah.
they watched it long enough to know when to move. And
Mm.
we have to use that type of precision when we are engaging our young people. Don't be too forceful.
Mm.
But at the same time, don't ignore the fact that they are exhibiting some abnormal behavior.
Mm.
Ask questions, be present, take them out to eat, use those opportunities to build rapport with them. You may be the auntie that's closest to the mother that passed, or you may be the uncle that's closest to the grandmother or whatnot. But by you being present and letting them know, hey, I'm trying to learn. I want to be a part of the process. No, I wasn't here for the first 13, 14 years of your life, but I'm here now. I'll take the adolescent smart mouth. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's a hit. I'll take that.
Yeah, absolutely. I earned it.
I'm still here and I
Mm-hmm.
want you to be okay. They need somebody. They want to know if you're real, if you're serious about walking this journey with them.
Mm.
But truly enough, we have to get to a point where we are not so wrapped up in our day-to-day lives and the
Mm-hmm.
bills and the the structure of our selves,
Mm-hmm.
that we are missing the mark to connect with these young people, because they need you.
Absolutely.
They need us.
Absolutely.
They really do.
Absolutely. Let me tell you something. That surfing analogy, we can just go ahead and pass the collection plate right now, because that surfing analogy was perfect, because it is a process. Watching, right? I can't pounce on everything, because I do think as parental units, caregivers, adults in people's lives, when we see something, well, we can go a couple of different ways. One, we can see it and dismiss it and ignore it because we don't want to deal with it, because we wrapped up in our stuff, what you were just saying. But then other times we're so overly vigilant that we are literally every single thing. Then we got questions and we are drilling these children.
Don't do that.
And right, and they're gonna shut down. But I love the point you made earlier, and I do believe you're the first person who I've ever heard say that. Watch them when they're talking too much.
Oh yeah, when they're rambling, or they just don't want to let you go.
Mm.
That's a sign of something. It may or may not be grief, but that's something. Pay attention to that. Wanting to sleep all day. There's just so many different signs. I'm just trying to think some things that stood out in a couple of my sessions. Overworking, always working. Because when you're working, you're not dealing
You
with
don't have
you're
to focus
numbing
on
it.
your
You don't
grief.
have to focus on it. No, I see you.
Yeah. You mentioned the sex as, one of those numbing addictive behaviors. And a lot of people don't look at sex in our young people as something to do to numb pain. We're quick to say our kids are promiscuous or they're
smelling themselves.
fast and not understanding. No, this young one is hurting.
Yeah, they're hurting. And adolescence is a very important time period, because they're being shaped into who they're going to be as adults. So if a part of them is their sexual or their sexual activity and their involvement. And so if that's being shaped at this age and they're using that space in their life to cover up grief, that's setting them up for failure in the future. So we want to be cognizant of what our young folks are doing, how to properly engage with them, and how to have that conversation without shaming them, making them feel condemned, but just letting them know, hey, I've noticed this behavior, no judgments, just talk to me. What's going on in your head? Why, help me to understand where you are. And just sit there and listen and give them that space. And when I say give them the tools, what I mean, and I think all of us as adults, because I have a 2-year-old, and I have to often tell her, Carter, because there are times I want to tell her, stop whining, stop whining. What do you want? But I have to remind her, you have a tool and it's your words. Use your words. Are you upset? Are you angry? What do you want? Point to what you want. That's the same way with dealing with adolescents. When you get upset and you get angry, because you're going to get triggered. You never get over the grief and the death of somebody. I'm still dealing with the death of my cousin. He died in 2006, and I still am triggered. But I have the tools of the comfort of family members, calling my folks in my circle, thinking of not only the good times, but revisiting some of the things that we've done together, expressing myself in productive ways, finding ways to deal with the pain without hurting someone else or hurting myself. So that's what I mean about, giving them the tools. Let them know, hey, you don't have to isolate yourself. Now, you may need to, if you feel like you want to be alone, have a conversation with the people that you stay with so they can understand what's going on, communicate with them, and then find an opportunity to get into a space where you can grieve effectively. You need your time, you need your moment, but then come back to the space that supports you, because that's where you're going to get your strength. That's where you're going to get your motivation. So that's what I mean about giving them the tools, letting them know, reminding them, hey, this is not going to go away overnight. And I'm here to walk with you, but you have everything inside of you that you need to get through this. And we just have to help them to identify what those things are.
And that's a good point too, I think, for parents who are watching, for aunties, uncles, loved ones in these people's lives, because often what I hear, I work with the adults who are saying they feel that powerlessness. I don't know how to support them. I don't know how to help them. You mentioned, numbing and trying to manage their pain, but also that you don't end up being a harm to yourself. Even this notion of kids being suicidal, adults have a hard time being able to navigate that, because we go, as you said earlier, to our own places of guilt and to our own trauma that we've had about maybe someone didn't teach us. So we don't have the tools, we don't have the resources. So for those caregivers, for those educators, for those family members who are trying to figure out, because you said ask questions. What questions do I ask? How do I even start this process of talking to a child, particularly when I may not be developed enough myself to even be able to understand some of the dynamics, because I might get triggered because I got my own grief I haven't dealt with, right? So what are some of these questions that we can ask to support our youth, even if we're just uncertain, we don't really know how to navigate this? What are some things that we can say, or some places even that we can refer them so that we can make sure that they are being heard?
Yes. Ooh, so for me, and this is a practice of mine,
Okay.
I don't start a conversation with anyone, whether it's someone in my family or whether it's a client. I don't start a conversation, or I don't start probing until I build rapport with them.
Okay.
I just don't. I don't,
Okay.
because it's just extremely important. It's intrusive. So I believe that if you are a parent or loved one, a family member who is co-parenting now and guardianship with the family, it's important for you to not go in making your pronouncements and your demands and your commands and all of this, because these young folks are dealing with a lot. It is extremely important to just build that relationship, build that rapport, have conversations about things that they're interested in so they can be comfortable enough to open up to you. Once you get to that comfortability, then you could just start asking them, hey, is it okay that we talk about this? Or I want to ask you about this, but I wasn't sure. if you were ready. Are you ready to have a conversation about whatever it is that you're going to have a conversation about? If they open the door, great. Allow them to open that door, read the room. Don't go in that door and start straight into the refrigerator. Don't let nobody come into my house, opening my refrigerator.
Come
Go
on,
sit on the
analogy.
couch. Go on, sit on the couch of their mind, sit on the couch and wait for them to pass you the remote before you start turning the channel. And, just having that, giving them the will to drive that part, because there are places in their emotional house that they're going to allow you to go. But that's that back room. That's the messy room. Don't nobody go in that room. They're not ready to go in there. I dealt with some clients. I had to wait about 8 months before we started talking about their loved one who passed, whether it was a mother or father. There were clients where we talked about it right away because they were ready. But that's why I said it's important to build rapport. So when you go in and you're allowing them to drive the conversation, if you notice something, and I would just say, trust your intuition. I remember one time, one of the clients made a comment, and this person's comments, they mentioned their loved one's death for the first time. They actually said, when my parent died. And I let this person finish their comment. And I had to go back and I said, do you realize? No, I let her know that I was going to journey back. I said, I was listening to what you were saying. Can we go back to this statement? Do you realize this is the first time in our time together that you've actually admitted or stated verbally that your parent had passed? And it was just a pause there because they did not realize that I actually made it real. I said it because for the longest time, there were just ways to just gloss over it. This client would just have conversations to kind of gloss over it. But that was a moment there. And the only thing I did was bring this person back to the comment. But that opened up a 40-minute conversation about what transpired during that time.
Can we just live in that space for a minute? Because I don't want to gloss over that, because this is a very important point. You said several, but one of the things that really resonated for me is that people are not ready yet to process and discuss their grief, and we're pushing them because we want to go ahead and get this process going. We want to move you along. And so we don't, when you said, I just invited you into the house, just sit on the couch. Don't come in here changing the TV channel. Don't go in my refrigerator. Don't go in that messy, just sit. You have not been invited anywhere other than this living room to sit on this couch.
Yeah, right there.
And so how many times do we dismiss kids? This is another way we're dismissive of children. When we tell them, oh, you can have boundaries when it's convenient. But now that you are trying to set this boundary in grieving, that you are not yet even ready to say out loud that this person who you love died, we are saying, oh, no, you need to talk about it. How you gonna heal if you don't talk about it?
They're not ready. They're not ready. And we have to be okay with them not being ready. There's some stuff we weren't ready to talk about. That boyfriend, that girlfriend that left and that just dropped you for somebody else. It took me years to be ready to talk about that.
There's some pain in that thing, isn't it?
Give these maybe an opportunity to process and to be ready to share that with you, because that opens up so many other doors of guilt. Because this parent, think about it. A lot of our young people, and I remember being at Georgia Gwinnett when a lot of the students were losing parents right and left. They couldn't go to the hospital. The parents died in the hospital with the doctors and the nurses, our critical
our frontline service
providers.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Service providers. But the kids weren't there. The children weren't there. They couldn't be there. So what was the last conversation before the parents got sick? What were the unresolved issues? Is the child blaming themselves for giving the parent COVID because they weren't wearing masks.
Mm,
There's guilt. There's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of anger. And it's just important for us to understand there may be a reason why they don't want to talk about it,
mhm,
because maybe they don't have they're not able to fully articulate, but then there may be other areas that they're not really ready to approach or address
mhm,
because it's so painful.
mm,
It's
mhm,
it's not just the grief of loss.
mhm,
It's the grief of unresolved issues. It's the grief of, you left me before I graduated from middle school.
mm,
I'm supposed to graduate from college. So
mm,
not only am I not going to be able to walk with my college or my high school friends, we got to do a virtual graduation. You're not going to be there.
mm,
This is something we always talked about. And not only that, what about the other milestones? Marriage,
mm.
you know, um, all the
Children,
other things, children.
yeah, first jobs.
It's a lot to talk
Mm,
about because once
yeah,
you admit my parent is gone or my parents are gone, then you have to address these other issues.
what that
And they,
means.
what does that mean? And if you don't have
Mhm,
anybody, if they don't feel confident that they have somebody that's going to be there with them constantly throughout that journey, they're
mhm,
going to shut it in. They're going to shut it down and deal with it in a different way. So that's
mm,
why I said, get on that couch, because when you get on that couch, you're letting them know I'm giving you the power um, to drive this emotional
mhm,
space. This
mhm,
is your emotional space. Not only am I validating that you have it, but I'm validating that you're in control of this
mhm,
conversation.
mm,
You're in control, and I'm just a visitor that wants. I'm a loved one. I'm a support
mhm,
system that wants to be here with you, no matter what this looks like. I want to be here with you. So that's what they're looking for. My
mhm.
mom always says that old people and babies are the
Yes.
are the most real people. But I also want to add adolescents. Adolescents are real in a way where if they don't want to fool with you, if they don't trust you, they're not
Mhm,
gonna fool with you.
mhm.
But if they trust you, they'll open up that door and they will tell you any and everything that you need to know, as long as they feel like they can trust you.
Absolutely. And that's the key right there, to go back to what you said about building this rapport. If
Mhm.
I have not established a foundation with you, just a general foundation that you know I'm going to be there, that I'm not just here temporary, because you just lost somebody that had been with you.
Yes. Someone
And
who knew all my secrets.
absolutely. So you are probably very uncomfortable connecting to someone else for fear, to go back to what you said about your mom and her dealing with illness as you were growing up. I'm waiting on the call.
Ain't no go.
So are you going to die too?
Mhm,
Because what death does is it makes us more obsessive about death.
mhm,
So all of the mortality issues that we didn't have to think about, death forces you to think about, because now it's right here. It's
mhm.
different when it was out there
Yeah.
and I still felt safe and protected. But now that home that I just invited you into, it got violated
Yes.
because death was here,
Mhm.
sitting right next to me, and I didn't even know.
I didn't know it. I didn't get any warnings. No one gave me a memo or nothing. It just came and just ran rush out.
Absolutely. So I'm not going to just be that eager to open up to you
Mhm,
about something so delicate. And I might want to talk to you about some other things first to test the water
mhm.
and have you, like you said, 8 months for a client before
Yeah.
they even started. So we have to be patient, I'm hearing you
Mhm.
say, with our
Very
young
patient.
people on
Mhm.
their time, not on our time. We're not used to that as adults. We've all heard that you seen, not heard, you're a
Yes.
child, you need to stay in the child. All of these things, we have to abandon some of that outdated philosophy about our children. No, you, like you said, you get to drive.
Mhm,
You get to figure out what wave you want to surf. You get
mhm,
to decide when I get to come in and what
mhm,
I get to do once I'm in there.
mhm,
And so we do have to shift our philosophy about that. We don't control what our children do in this grieving process. Our
mhm.
children have to find their own way in their grief, and we're there to support and guide.
And you know what? And I want to say something right there. I asked one of my clients and I told her about this, about this conversation. And I said,
Mm,
if you were to say anything to the people, what would you want me to say to them? What would you want me to express ab- about this experience that you and so many other young people are experiencing? What do you want them to know? And she said, I would like for them to know that yes, we are hurt and we are grieving, but don't discount our strength. Because if
mm,
you help us to get to a point where we can stand, we will walk and we will thrive. But don't ignore us when we're angry. Don't just leave and get so tender where you can't take it, but be there enough to say, hey, I understand that you're angry, but this anger is something else. But then she said also, don't come in too power heavy. Allow
aggressive.
aggressive,
Mm-hmm.
right? Trust me enough to understand that I have I should have some autonomy, enough autonomy to get through this, and trust that I have the strength and I have the skill set to get through it. Her whole thing was folks looked at her as a little girl or
Mm,
a child, but she's at that age of adolescent where she's right in adulthood. Give me
mm-hmm.
the opportunity to use my
Mm-hmm.
autonomy to get through this, and
Mm-hmm.
don't overcrowd me with your
Mm,
parental authority.
mm, mm.
But it's a fine, it takes some finessing,
Yeah, it
but
sounds
you
like
can
it's a
do it.
fine line. We want to empower them to be able to recognize that there is going to be pain. Grief doesn't end. It transitions into
Yeah.
different phases. It doesn't end. And you can be in grief and still also be able to have moments where you celebrate again, joys
Yes.
again,
Yes.
accomplishments again, being able to get through difficult things, coping, right? Because we want to teach our children how to cope. And we often say our young people don't know how to cope, and we never gave them the skills.
And you know what I'm learning is that a lot of our young people, yes, they've lost parents, but
Mm-hmm.
there's some of our young people are dealing with grief and they are still caregivers.
Mm.
That's a whole nother conversation.
Yes, ma'am. Speak on that a little bit. And they're still
They're
caregivers for
caregivers.
for other siblings,
For
or
other
who are they?
siblings,
Mm-hmm.
for other family members, because we're
Mm.
still dealing with the social determinants of health within our society.
Mm-hmm.
We're still dealing with being African Americans being disproportionately affected with poverty,
Mm-hmm.
illnesses, a slew of things. You know the whole gamut.
Mm-hmm.
So you have young folks who may be caregivers to other, like you said, other siblings.
Mm-hmm.
They may be caregivers to grandparents who are
Mm-hmm.
their guardians, but
Mm-hmm.
they have to help the grandparents manage their day-to-day care, their care, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
medicines or going to dialysis appointment. It's just a lot. It's a
Mm-hmm.
lot on them.
Mm-hmm.
And to expect them to just be children, but then they have a weight of responsibility like
Mm-hmm.
adults. Whereas where do they go to resort? Where is
Yeah,
their
where's their respite? Where's their
opportunity,
peace?
the peace? How
Yeah.
do they get renewed? How do they get
Mm,
revived and rejuvenated?
mm,
Because if they come in a room with a whole bunch of adults,
mm,
they're still considered children, but they have adult
mm,
responsibilities. And we
mm,
have to find a
mm,
way to acknowledge that, but then provide a remedy for that, because
mhm,
everything should not be, or they should not have the weight of
mhm,
responsibility of an adult all the time,
mhm,
and then be treated like a child. So we have to
mm,
begin to engage those conversations. What does this look like now for my family, and how do I properly um fix this,
mhm,
or
mhm,
how do I situate um a style of parenting that fits this particular mold.
Yes.
A short story. My
Mhm.
mom, she always talks about when I was sick with you, yeah, you had the house, I was cooking and cleaning, fried chicken and stuff. When I was 8 years old, I knew how to fry up some chicken and cook macaroni and cheese, 8, 9, 10 years old.
Mm.
When my mom got better, she had to come and take her house back.
Mm.
So now I'm doing adult stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, I've been
I'm a lot,
parentified at this point because
right. I'm a
yeah.
latchkey kid. I'm
Yeah.
fixing dinner,
Mhm.
full-fledged dinners for my
Mhm.
brother and my father. But now mama is, she's getting better.
Mhm.
So how do I engage
Mm.
this child
Mm.
slash adult that had
Mm.
adult responsibilities, but
Yes.
now I want to put her back in a child's place? But I've already crossed the threshold of
Mm.
doing adult stuff. So that's when she started taking me out to eat. We would go to these little restaurants. We would go
Mhm.
out for breakfast. Breakfast is our meal,
Okay.
and we would have one-on-one time.
Mhm.
And she said, she would have these conversations. Tell me what's going on. What do you want to talk about? This is our girl time. What do you want to talk about?
Mhm.
So I'm still her daughter,
Mhm.
but then I'm placed in a role that's not putting me in my place. You're
Mm.
giving me an opportunity to explore this space
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
was allowed into, and that was healthy for me. So
Okay.
that is something that I
Yeah,
that helped.
that's very important for you to share because there are so many young people that are in roles. And then you think about when you lose parents and you're going to stay with people, you may be going into a household where you weren't caregiving before,
Mhm,
but now you are having these adult responsibilities. And
mhm.
so it does shift for you. So I like this. The reality is that's what some kids are dealing with.
Yes.
People that they love and care about and who are caring for them may be sick. They may need to be, um, the person who listens and comprehends because they may have people that don't know how to read or
Right.
are, having memory problems or other challenges and may not just have a lot of education. And so they don't necessarily understand what's
Mhm.
being communicated. And so children are serving in these roles,
Yes.
assisting, but to have a moment where you get to still be a kid, where
Yes.
you get to
Yes.
go off and tell me about your day.
Mhm.
And what are some of the things that kids are doing?
Right. What do you want to do as a kid? What do you
Yeah,
want to?
absolutely. Yeah, you want to play, you want to talk, like, oh, the attention is on me. Yeah, talk
Yes. Put
what you
attention
want to
on
do.
them. I
Yeah,
think that's good.
absolutely.
Place the attention on them.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. I
Mhm.
love that. Because we are navigating these dual realities.
Yes.
You are both a child and sometimes also functioning in this adult role. And I want you to be able to have a time because we as adults need a break.
Yes. I'm tired of adulting.
Listen, stop calling my name. My mother used to tickle me. She said, I'm going to change my name.
I say that all the time. My name is
Stop.
Mama no more.
Yeah, I'm not mama anymore. And little kids will be confused. They'll be like, well, what's your name then? What do I call
What
you?
are you?
Yeah, because I'm gonna wear that out too. But it spoke to needing that break from having
Yes.
to be responsible
Yes.
all
Oh,
the time. And so our little ones and our young adults, they need breaks too, to not have to be responsible for anything but just being.
yes. And as you're talking, what comes to mind, and this is this is a bigger challenge, and I think it's going to take a longer conversation on another
Mm-hmm.
day, are the children who don't have parents or loved ones to go home to. They will put into
Mm-hmm.
foster care system, or they're
Mm-hmm.
institutionalized now. How does grief play out in that institution where a parent or both parents are deceased, whether it's from COVID or whatever, and they leave a structure, a home structure
Mm-hmm.
where everything was pretty much, their home, that's their state of home,
Mm-hmm.
homeostasis or homogeneous, and they are taken out, plucked out of that space, placed into foster care, where they have to get up at a certain time, have to make their bed up at a certain
Mm-hmm.
time. They're pretty much a number. They have
Mm-hmm.
house parents, but they're not their parents. They're
Mm-hmm.
living with other young people who may be fully institutionalized. So you got to deal with that politic. So how are you able to properly grieve? You can't sleep in because you're on a schedule.
Mm-hmm.
You don't trust people that are there
Mm-hmm.
because you haven't built those relationships. So
Mm-hmm.
how are these children effectively communicating? So that's a whole nother
That is a
element.
whole nother. you think about foster care, group homes,
Yes.
or even relatives that you never knew.
Right.
And so these strangers,
Yes.
these extended family members who are taking you, their traditions are different.
Different
Your hair,
generational.
your hair care, maybe your family celebrated birthdays. Maybe you're now in a family that has a different ideology and birthdays aren't celebrated. Christmas
Right.
isn't celebrated.
Mhm.
And so you're literally shifting
Mhm.
everything that you knew and held on to as dear
Yes.
is now something different
Mhm.
from you. Like, well, I don't know how to do your hair, so I'm gonna cut it.
Uh-huh. Or you used to have your hair done at a certain beauty shop or barber shop, but you stay in another state. So
Hmm.
you have to be reacclimated to a whole nother
Absolutely.
it's so much. It's so much. But I think the most important thing, even in that regard, I
Mm,
think is extremely important for our faith communities
mm,
to rally around these
mhm,
group homes,
mhm,
because even with the way in which we understand faith, if we show up and say, hey, we want to sponsor a meal on
mm,
Sundays,
mm,
we want to give gifts cards and gift certificates for
mhm,
holidays,
mm,
we want to adopt a child, as far as
mm,
like be a mentor, be a pen
mhm,
pal for this child. That means so much, and it
mm,
seems small, but it means so much because it takes them away from that institutionalized setting for
mhm.
an hour or 30
Yeah.
minutes, and it gives them a sense of being and
Mhm.
connection
Yeah.
outside of that space. So it's just
Mhm.
very important to connect with those institutions.
That is an excellent point because I think that, if I were to say what's the overarching kind of theme of some of the recommendations you've made for us today, connection to me is one of the things that
Mhm,
stands out, that it's important for our young people to feel grounded in some way.
mhm,
So I've lost my anchors
mhm,
in this world, and I'm out here like a piece of wind, a piece of paper flapping in the wind. And
mhm,
so I need something to connect me back to being seen, to being valued, to being respected, to feeling whole
mhm.
again. And so that can be done through the church, that can be done through our educators, that can be done through our community of hairstylists,
Sororities and
our
fraternities.
sororities and fraternities. Like there's this endless network that we could create so
Mhm.
that a young person always has at least one space
Yes.
where they just get to be that kid.
Mhm. And also, there are resources within the community. There are spaces called the community coalitions where
Mm,
they provide support services. I know in East Point they have one. They provide support services for grandparents who are the main guardians of young people. And this is in East Point, Georgia. But
okay.
I'm pretty sure that there are other community coalitions around the state of Georgia who are funded to help support our newer our families that are filling in the gaps for
Mm,
parents who were lost during COVID. There are also, you can reach out to Fulton. I know Fulton County, DeKalb County, I'm pretty sure Cobb County Office or Department of Mental Health Services have a plethora of services that support mental health. Needs of our adolescents, as well as caregivers of adolescents who lost parents during COVID. So tap into those local, state, and county governments for resources. The issue is they have these resources out there, but then the people, it's hard for them to
we don't
connect
know about them.
resources to the people.
Mm,
That's why I say it's important for your
mm,
clergies to be
mm,
connected
mm,
with the state. It's important for our pastors and our organizational leaders to be
mm,
connected with resources in the state so that we can provide those opportunities to our parishioners, to our families,
mm,
and our friends, because the
mm,
money is out there, the resources are out there, but we have to find ways to connect,
to be able to access them.
to access those resources.
Well, as you said, this conversation could go on, but I do like to be mindful of your time. I want to thank you Dr. Charity Starr Mitchell, for all of the great information that you have provided for us today and giving us a better foundation for understanding how our youth may be affected by losing loved ones during COVID. Join us on next Tuesday, August 30th for the conversation, The Forever Heartbreak of Losing a Child. We want to thank you all for joining us this evening. We thank you for your comments that you've dropped and your questions that you dropped. And if you need any information about some of the resources that were mentioned, just make sure you message and we'll get that information to you. So everyone have a great night and be well.